Hello out there, YouTube, again. So in the first couple of videos, I talked about the three main knives that got me into the knife life. The last video, no, in the second video, I talked about my regular carry rotations. As you probably noticed, I like to carry a lot of budget stuff. I do have other things. You know, my knives, my choice. I prefer to carry my budget knives right off the bat. But and then the last video, you saw a bit of a project that I'm working on. I guess moving forward, I'll do more just talking about some of specific parts of my collection, and this is one that I really like. One of my favorites. It's hard to say which is the most favorite. This is the Spyderco Magnitude. Let's see if we can get it up there. Carbon fiber scales, G10 inlay on the pivot, G10 backspacer, kind of a brownish. Flipper tab, one of the few. There's not a whole lot of Spydercos that I've noticed with the flipper tab. Still has that thumb hole. I don't know if I can do it. This is, you'll see, I'll try it later. This knife has an extremely thick blade stock. It is a big old honking beast of a knife, but because it's so heavy, it is, with a little coaxing, it is pretty fall shut. It's got an amazing action on it. It runs on bearings, but it is a beast of a knife. I see a lot of guys doing size comparisons, so I'm going to compare it to a few knives that we should all be fairly familiar with. The Spyderco Tenacious, the Benchmade Reptilian, or I'm sorry, the Benchmade Bug Out, and then we've all seen this one a number of times, the Kershaw Leak. You can see, judging by the size comparisons, this is a pretty big honking knife. It is by no means a small guy. By pretty much any and all measurements, it's bigger than all three of these. This is, as I said, a carbon fiber scales. I don't know if I can demonstrate it very well on camera. If you can get an idea of the thickness there, it's hard to demonstrate from my angle. Again, I'm new to this still, but it's a big old honking guy. Blade length is right at 3.5 inches. Overall length is right at 8 1/4, and the cutting edge of the blade is right about 3.4 inches. So this is a big old, like I said, it's a big knife. Let's get a weight on it. That seems to be the thing that everybody does. At 5.165 ounces. It's a big knife. So, like I said, it's hard to do that because this blade is so heavy. This is a titanium liner lock on bearings, carbon fiber scales, titanium pocket clip, S30V steel. Just a beautiful knife. I love this kind of modified sheep's foot blade. You'll notice a trend in the knives that I really like. You know, this blade shape, the thumb hole. The only thing keeping this from being my absolute favorite knife ever is the liner lock. Now, that said, I do prefer a liner lock over a frame lock, but at the same time, I actually prefer either a compression lock or an axis lock or something reasonably similar to an axis lock. This knife runs smooth. I did run into some issues right after I got this knife. Where it just started running real gritty and gunky. It sounded like I would have described it as like a playground seesaw. So it just made this real bad creaking, squealing noise on its way open and on its way shut. It developed a really bad case of lock stick, and as you can see, that lock locks up. I mean, and that is a positive lockup. Developed a real bad case of lock stick, along with the horrible sound, and I was just really kind of put out and disappointed by this knife because, you know, for what it cost, which is hard to say because I had to get this on the secondary market, so these prices can vary pretty wildly. But for what this knife cost, you know, and I had this beautiful knife that I absolutely loved, but I was just unhappy with the way it was performing. I took it apart and just cleaned it up, cleaned it, wiped everything down, re-lubed everything, put it back together. What I also did while I had it apart, I took the face of the lock bar, and I took some 2000 grit sandpaper and I just polished the face of that lock bar. Once I put everything back together, runs like it's on bearings, because it is, and no more lock stick. I probably have the pivot a little tighter than I need it to be. But I just love this knife. Now here's the problem I have with this knife. It is absolutely too big for EDC, in my opinion. I'm not saying that you have to go tiny, and I'm not saying that you have to go super thin and light. I typically will go with something like this, albeit not the copper scales that weigh an absolute ton. But it's just so beefy. I mean, it is substantially thicker. Like, I could get another scale on the Tenacious. I don't know if I can. It is just a honking beast of a knife. It is, now, for as big as it is, it's relatively light, but it's, you know, compared to a bug out, compared to a leak, it's still pretty heavy. And like I said, it's just so big. I just don't think it's good for EDC because of its size. Because of its size, it's so big. At the same time, man, it's just too fancy to go digging holes in the backyard with, right? Like, that is a beautiful knife. I love this knife. It's a Carrie design. I forget Carrie's first name. He did do a couple other knives with Spyderco. The Rubicon, I think, was the predecessor to this one. I love this knife. I mean, I can't stress it enough. for as big as it is, it actually feels quite good in the hand. Got a little bit of a forward choil. It just feels, it fits. It just feels so great. So yeah, S30V, sheep's foot, Warncliffe, whatever, carbon fiber scales, titanium liner lock on bearings, Taichung, Taiwan, manufactured. Absolutely one of my favorite knives. So that's it. I'm just, like I said, I'm just going to start throwing some, now that you know a little bit about the things that I look for when I buy, have a small taste of my collection. I'll start just dropping in the nicer ones, dropping in some knives here and there, the ones that I like, the ones that I don't like. I do have around the Ticket, and I'm the Dallas area, we have a radio station called The Ticket, and they say hot sports opinion all the time. I do have a rather hot sports opinion on the one knife that I absolutely do not like, that would actually be a real good comparison with this one. You know, so I'll make a video on knives that I don't like. I'll make a video on knives that I do like. Some of my favorites. These will probably be my 3 main comparison knives, just because, you know, everybody knows the Tenacious, everybody knows the Bug Out, everybody knows the Leak. But yeah, like I said, this one's about the Spyderco Magnitude. Really good knife if you ever get the chance to get one at a decent price. You know, not a bad investment. So that's it. If you guys have any questions, throw them down in the comments. You guys have a great night.